Now we are gonna let the camera be able to tick so that we can do a little bit of animation here. So for our camera here, we want to add a void function tick, which will take a float an absolute time and a delta time. So what we want to do is in addition to sort of having a last tick, we want to have a first tick so that we know when we just first started here, so that I don't have to keep track of that. And then we need to, like, we have a renderer and a display. We want to move our camera out to actually being an object we instantiate once. So we're going to make our camera here. And suck at that. There we go. So now we have our camera out here. So every time we go through our main loop, we can take our camera and we can tick it with the current time, which is now minus the first tick. And then we have the delta time. And then we pass in the camera here. So now we're gonna need to, yeah, great, it didn't compile good. So now we need to sort of implement this tick. So what we simply want to do, or what I think would be kind of cool to do, is to just rotate around the y-axis nice and simply. So what we do is we take our rotation, and on our y-axis we will simply, we can do this sort of the delta way, simply add 0.01 times the delta time. So now we should have a camera that slowly rotates. We have an object that slowly rotates, which means I've got the order of this wrong, which is, yeah, natural enough, because we start by setting up the camera, then the camera's rotation, and then we move the camera in the whirl. So let's try that. So now we have the camera moving. So that means conceptually we can actually start taking input and use that to move the camera, which is what we're going to try and do now. So keyboard input and the like is always interesting, and in this case we're using Emscripten, so we have this sort of HTML5 interface we need to work against, where we get events which allow us to know things. So you can sort of get a callback whenever things happen. You have a target which it sort of guesses depending on what we want to do. And then you have user data, which is some object we can call back on, cast to something usable, whether we want to capture it, and then the actual callback function. So for callback functions, we get some sort of event type, we get a event pointer with some information, and we get our user data pointer back. And yeah, that's going to be interesting. So we can do stuff like Emscripten event key press, key down, and key up. We're mainly looking at key down and key up because we want to track the state of certain keys. So what we are going to do is we're going to do sort of an input class. So again, new class. We're going to call this one input. Sorry about that. Seems OBS just crashed on me, but hopefully we're back again. And good to go. Just check the, yeah, good. So we have an input class. We're going to want to sort of initialize it here. And what we are going to want to do is we are going to want to keep track of key presses and which keys are pressed and which aren't. So what we're going to do is we are going to, essentially we're going to have, we can sort of do this either one of two ways. We can try and map every key to yes or no, it's pressed, or we can maintain a set of all the pressed keys and then just query that. And I think it'll probably be easier to just maintain a set. So we are going to use an unordered set for this. Unordered set, and we're just going to identify keys by a string. Try and make it somewhat simple. And if it's in the set, then it's pressed right now. If it's not in the set, it's not pressed. So that's simple. So to do this, then we're going to want to have a query. Is this key pressed? So we're going to take a constant standard string reference key here, and we can use that to query. And then we're going to try and keep track of which keys are pressed and which are not pressed. So when we start up our input class here, we are going to want to register a couple of callbacks. So we're going to include the HTML5 library that Emscripten provides for us. Pretty sure that's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. Might be an idea to also include the string header here. Otherwise, we're going to get lots of complaints. Great, cannot find HTML5.h. So it's in Emscripten /HTML5.h. Much better. So what we want to do here is we want to set callback. So we're going to say Emscripten set set, let's see, a key down callback. We are going to target it at whatever. That means the Emscripten framework will find out what's sort of most practical. We're going to use this as our sort of our user data so that we can get back to our input reference at some point when we need to. We are going to use capture, and our callback function is going to be a static function in our input, which is going to be called key down. And we'll get to declaring that in a moment. We're also going to have a, actually these don't, we're just going to have these as static methods here. Now, better to have them declared that way. Yeah, just debating with myself what's the best way of doing stuff. So we also register a key up so that we get both when keys are pressed and when they get released. So these functions are going to be private static functions. So we have a static, and then we need to check out the, here we go, the way these need to be declared. So it's an EM pool. Yeah, I'm going to want to include that. and then it's called key down. It takes an integer, which is the event type. It takes a const mscripton Lord event, I'm gonna guess, with the event data. And then what we get is we get a void pointer, which is going to be back to our input device. And then just like this, we are going to have a key up function. Yeah, they're not implemented. But that causes these things to sort of resolve, and then we are going to start by implementing them just quickly to output to our console that we have a key down event. I'm gonna need to include IO stream for this. So we're just gonna say key down. And then we're gonna say key up. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to want to instantiate our input as well. So we want to make a unique input. And to do that, we need to include the input header. There we go. So what are we returning? Because we're getting warnings on that. So I think what we need to do is we sort of need to return true from these to say, yeah, we've handled this event. So we're going to return the mscripton true thing here from these. Compile that, and let's see what happens if we reload over here and we start hitting. We're getting key down, key up events. Just switch it over so you guys can really see it. Lots of key up and key down events. Great. So let's just transition back. That means we've got our input working. So what we need to do is we have our input void pointer here, which we know is an input object, so we can cast it. So we're gonna do this. Then this is going to be a static cast to an input pointer. I'm thinking static cast might be able to do it. Otherwise, we're gonna have to go with the wonderful power of reinterpret cast. Oh, yeah, that was a bad name. It's gonna be like that. Input conflict is sort of overriding the name of the class, which is wonderful. Yep, we can do that. So when we have a key down event, what we're gonna want to do is we are going to want to have our press here. We are going to want to insert an object, and what we want to insert, at least I really hope that I remember this right, is that what we want to do is insert. Otherwise, we're going to have a look in a moment. we can go into the event and we can go get our keyboard code, which is, the expression must be in our, oh. So I'm probably remembering something wrong. Time for documentation. So cppreference.com is probably the most wonderful site for this. So insert. What I'm hoping to do is I'm hoping to hit this overload, which for some reason I'm not, because it's probably because this is a char. Yeah, it's a char array and I'm looking for a string. So there is an in place which constructs the string from the char in place in the set. So we're going to do that instead. And we're also just going to output the event code or the key code here so that we can see it. And we're going to do something similar down here, except rather than in placing it, we want to, we want to do an erase, which I can do on the key side, which requires that I've constructed it. So what I've just done is sort of this little section of code. So we cast it, we in place the character code into it, and then we just print out the key down event still just to see it. So what we want to do is we want to erase. And let's see if we can just do this way. I also need to grab this line of code so that we have the, yeah, it seems to work. Yeah, I still can't hit the run button. Surprise. So yeah, we're getting lots of events here. And with any luck, we should actually be able to have this. So when we ask our input device whether a given key is pressed, what we do is we return whether our pressed array here, this pressed or set here, can we find this key in the set? If we can't find it, in which case it will return the value of this end iterator, then it's not there. If it's not the end, then the key is pressed. So what we want to do, just for the fun of it, is we're going to have our camera here. We are going to have it take our reference to the input here. So when we create our camera here, it knows that there is something called an input class. It takes a const input reference input, and it's going to store that. Notice leave the reference to it. So we take that, and now we're going to use the sort of initializer syntax. So we initialize input from input, and then what we want to do is we want to say, okay, if, let's say, in our input here, so we can ask our input is, for example, key A pressed, and this is complaining, probably can't resolve is press. Oh yeah, it doesn't know about the input class yet. So now we're actually using the input class rather than just handling references to it, so we need to talk about it. There we go. Now we're missing that this is not const, which it needs to be. So that we can, because again, this doesn't modify the actual object we're using. In that case, if A is pressed, we're going to want to add this rotation. else if, say, we've pressed key B, then we're going to subtract a little bit of rotation here. And let's try that out. So, when holding down the keys, I can rotate the camera now. It's amazing! Or is it? Yeah, I'm trying to use W and S as well because I kind of expect that to work. It doesn't really work unless you've coded it. So, let's try and see if we can't get a little bit of maybe some mouse input. So, mouse input. Probably similar approach. There, mouse, and you see there's this wonderful thing that's also called pointer lock, which we might want to grab. So, so there's something called pointer lock change and pointer lock arrow, which is probably not what we really want. Do we have anything said here? Not much other than that there's a click, a mouse down, mouse up, mouse enter, mouse things. What we kind of want is probably the mouse move event here. So we're going to try and see if we can't grab the mouse move event here. So we're going to do something similar to before. We have our key up, down, and so on. We want a mouse move callback. This is not going to be a keyboard event, it's going to be a mouse event. So we get that instead. So we're going to want to mscripten. Dear God, this is mscripten set mouse move callback. Again, pick the right place for me. I want to know this. Yes, I want to capture. And our callback is input mouse move. So again, we're just going to start by tracking and printing what goes on. I don't want to track or see these prints anymore, at least not for now. So we're going to go with a mouse move event here. And what we want to do is we want to get some coordinates. So, yeah, what's in the movement X and movement Y? That might be interesting. So we like have control reaches and non-void functions still need to return true. Let's see what happens. So these are just relative movements, and since sort of the last time this function was called, which I think is what we want. At least that seems somewhat sane. Now the trick is to get the pointer lock so that you can't see the mouse, but we'll worry about that later. So what for a game, usually sort of absolute coordinates aren't really that interesting. What we want is relative. We want to know what is the relative motion compared to last frame. So what we are going to do is we are going to pull in GLM again, because we might as well use the wonderful vector classes it has. So we are going to go for, do we have integer vectors? Maybe not. So we're going to go for a 2D vector this time. And we are going to say GLM vector 2, which is going to be our mouse motion. and my ability to spell is quite limited. And then we're going to add a function here, which will get the mouse motion since last time. Now this one is a little bit interesting because it will actually affect the state of the mouse motion, because when you get the mouse motion, since we want to keep it relative, we are going to be resetting the mouse motion so that we accumulate it until next time it's called. At least that is the idea. So let's try that out. So what we do here is we have these movement X and Y. So we're going to grab pointer again here. And then we are going to say our... Apparently I should also just adjust the names over in the header file here. There we go. So we have a mouse motion here. To that I'd like to add a little bit of additional here. I'd like to grab the event motion X and event movement Y. So that accumulates the mouse motion gradually in this sort of local variable. Then whenever we get called, we get a call to get mouse motion here. Yep, that one. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to quickly grab a copy of our mouse motion here. Then we're going to take our mouse motion and we're going to set it to nothing. So, like that, and then we're going to return the old value here. Great. So what we're going to have to do now is that our camera actually doesn't take a constant input, it's allowed to change the state of that input. So it's not just sort of passive, it will actually change the state of it, because we're going to track the mouse motion. Because what we want to do is we want to, for a moment ago we did this. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to use the mouse instead to control the axis. So we are going to take our rotation around the y-axis, and we are going to add some sort of scale factor, maybe something like that. We'll see how that works out. And then we're going to ask our input to get, actually we need to get the mouse motion ahead of time, because again, getting it resets it. So we need to grab a copy of it. There we go. So what we do is we get our mouse, so around the y-axis, which means left to right. Left to right in screen coordinates is the x-coordinate for the mouse, so we grab it like that. And then we want to rotate around the x-coordinate, because remember, sort of x is along, left. So in OpenGL, x is left right, y is up down, and z is far near. On the screen, x is left right, and z is, or y is up down, and I think the order of, or the directions of them, no, y counts from the top left and down the further down you go, so you have to make that negative. So here we want to subtract 0. Oh, this is sort of the part where you just experiment with it. If it works, good. If it doesn't, you change the sign. Now we're going to try and use the mouse to control the camera. So let's see how that goes. Surprisingly well. I mean, the scale constant is horribly low. But apart from that, I mean, that's just, let's try removing a 0. Let's see what happens. See, now we can move it. I mean, everything's... No, I think the X direction is doing what I expect it to do. The Y direction isn't doing what I expect it to do. Yeah, it's looking down when I'm moving my mouse up. You usually want it the other way around. But that's nice and simple to do. We just have to say plus everywhere. So that means we now have mouse motion on that. If we can grab the pointer lock, we can actually manage to grab the entire thing, and I hesitate to call it a game, but we can at least move